Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. My name is Cindy Quinlan. I'm an educational consultant with Abeka, and I do appreciate your taking the time. I know many of you are winding up school either this week or in the couple of weeks to come, and so you are busy. Some of you may have been able to join us in previous webinars, but for those of you who haven't, let me just say that a lot of the resources we'll mention today or refer back to are available on abeka.com/front office. There you'll find recordings of previous webinars, a number of resources attached to those webinars, but also a free marketing toolkit. We'll mention that again today, but that has been something specifically created for Christian schools to be able to use and to be able to maximize as you seek to let your community know about the ways that you can help them and minister to them. Another resource that we've made available for teachers are some select Facebook groups, one for Christian school teachers and one for Christian school principals. Those of you who join these webinars, you'll automatically receive an invitation to join those. And I hope a number of you have already taken up on that invitation and have been able to connect with other Christian educators, perhaps in your state and even beyond your state to the rest of the US and perhaps even internationally. Those of you who may be watching this as a recording, you didn't sign up for a webinar. If you'd like to join one of those Facebook groups, just email us at schools@abeka.com and we'll be glad to send you that invitation. Today's webinar is going to be about enrollment and re-enrollment and strategies for you to work and campaign for your school. And so as we hear from our panelists, Micah Conlon and Justin Payne, later on we're going to have an opportunity to answer some of your questions. So as you're listening, if a question pops up, feel free to go to the bottom of your screen. There'll be a Q&A icon that you can click on and type in your question, and we'll be happy to get to that a little bit later. Some of you who have joined us in previous webinars may notice that Micah Conlon, Justin Payne look familiar. They've joined us in the past. Micah Conlon, you were able to join us in our first webinar with Amy Yohe. Micah Conlon currently works with us as a writer, as a creator for our high school curriculum in science as well as math, but he spent decades in the classroom as a teacher as well as a Christian school administrator. And so he's going to be able to give a lot of insight into re-enrollment. You've taught at 2 different schools, and I know as we talked yesterday and today, very different spectrums, very different communities. And so depending on the community you're in, you tweak your enrollment strategies. Justin Payne is Abeka's marketing supervisor. After he graduated with his MBA, he worked for PCC in coordinating its social media and marketing. We're glad to have him on our Abeka team, and he'll just be able to give a lot of the technical as well as a lot of that marketing interest and ideas. And I trust, as I've looked at what you two gentlemen have put together with the help of your teams, that what we'll have today will be helpful. So let's get into it. Micah, one of the first things we talk about in having a re-enrollment strategy is you must demonstrate dedicated leadership. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, certainly. Part of the enrollment process, people are looking for a strong leader. And with the whole COVID-19 pandemic that all of us have been through these last few months, it certainly has caused leadership styles and leadership ability to come to the forefront of people's minds. So there's some things that we could certainly consider when we're talking about the dedication involved in the re-enrollment process. It certainly does take work and effort, and at the forefront of that certainly should be the administrator. I mean, they're leading the school and leading the direction of what's going on in the re-enrollment process. We have a statement here: vision provides momentum and direction. When the leader pairs that vision with unrelented passion, you gotta be passionate about re-enrolling students into school and getting new families to come into your ministry. It's so important to have that passion, and visionary leaders have that. You have to think well past the pandemic that we've all been through, and you have to think about, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, how are the enrollment trends looking, how are things going? So you have to have that vision and that thinking process in order to be able to develop a good re-enrollment strategy. And I think it's an important concept here was presented in a book I was given a few years ago by a Chick-fil-A operator, very successful Chick-fil-A operator. And we all know Chick-fil-A and enjoy their chicken and all that. But one of the interesting features of that business is the training that they give their leaders. And this particular individual gave me a book. It's called Strength-Based Leadership. It was written by Rathan Kanchi, and it was an interesting book on leadership. I've read dozens of books on leadership, but this one had a unique perspective. And I think it's important for us to think about when we're talking about a dedicated leader and a visionary leader when it comes to the re-enrollment process. This book pointed out and looked at the perspective of not just characteristics of leaders, but also characteristics of followers. Like what are the things that followers are looking for in a leader? And they had some interesting things that I think parallel quite nicely with what we're enduring these last few months. And those four things, our followers need trust. They also have to have compassion, sense of compassion, sense that from the administration. They have to have a sense of stability, and they're looking for hope. And I think all four of those characteristics are certainly magnified in these recent weeks and months. So having a leader that is very capable of meeting the needs of the constituency is extremely important. And we're going to be highlighting some things throughout the course of this webinar that I think can help, give some practical tips and advice and some thoughts that hopefully will cause individuals to think about this whole process. You know, most of the time schools start the re-enrollment process a little bit earlier than now. But because of what's transpired, it's caused a lot of things to be pushed back. So some of these strategies I think could be implemented very soon in order to generate that re-enrollment that may be a little bit lacking right now. And so I think those things are very important. But that book really had some insight on those characteristics of followers.
So you talk about a leader needing to show trust, a leader needing to show hope. What are some ideas for how our principals, our administrators, our leaders to demonstrate that? Maybe they have it. How can they let other people know that they have it?
That's a great question. I think one of the key things, we all have heard the statement, actions speak louder than words. But what I would like to add to that statement is, but words are remembered much longer than their actions. This quite often as an administrator, you know, you would accomplish something would be done, and the school would be thriving, things would be going great, and people focused on that action. You proved what you were setting out to do, but sometimes what we say has a longer lasting impact on what we do, because once something occurs, it's checked off the list and you move right on to the next objective of some kind. But what you say has a lasting impact. From my teaching experience, I experience this quite often. When you promise your students you're going to bring something into the classroom, they remember that, and they're expecting that to take place. So having these characteristics, I think, are very important when it comes to developing that trust in relaying that compassion that you have for that family. I think those things are extremely important, and obviously families now are looking for hope. Especially at this point, they're hoping for their student can thrive in the upcoming school year. They're hoping things can get back to normal. So these things are what our followers are looking for. So actions have a big part of that, but also the words that we convey has a large impact on that as well. I think part of that is publicizing your plan. What are you planning to do? Again, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but including information on your website about your COVID-19 response. People are wanting to know what's going to happen and what you're planning on doing as a leader. And again, that's going to be very specific to your school. We could apply general principles to that, but I think that's important to let your constituency know, all of your constituency, your 1 to 2 year plan. And then what I like to do is I would like to implement a 3-year plan for my faculty, let them know what's going on and what my vision is for the school. And then maybe my 5-year plan that may be reserved more for my administrative team. And then if I have my 10 plus year plan, those big projects you're wanting, that land you're wanting to purchase to add a field or to add on to the gym or whatever that big major project is that's going to take some time to develop, those are typically reserved for your school board, your pastor, anybody like that has a direct impact on those types of decisions. But conveying that is very important. We may have all these great ideas in our mind, but unless we actually convey those thoughts to our constituency, they really won't get a sense of that leadership. And that also applies to the enrollment process. Why would a parent want to enroll their child in your school if they don't know the future of the school? So those things are extremely important to consider when we're thinking about the enrollment process.
So especially making public different, and safety is a big thing that a lot of parents are looking for. So your plans for how to maintain safety in the coming year, that can be public on the website, communicated in emails, but then also working with your faculty and board members. And just the big thing you're saying is just communicate it, write it down, make sure they know, make sure they bought in.
Certainly.
And just real quick, before we speak a little more with Justin about the importance of knowing your brand, you mentioned passion earlier, passion being such a key for leadership, to have it, to demonstrate it. And very few people are in education if they don't have a passion. But I know often when you get tired, often when you face many responsibilities, that passion can be hard to find. So it can be easy to say, be passionate, but before we move on to the next point, to just have a quick word or two. What if someone says, I'm not feeling very passionate right now, and yet I have to be the leader of my school? What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's a tremendous weight that all administrators have to carry. They hear it from every direction, right? They get it from the parent, they get it from the students, they get it from their faculty, especially in these recent weeks. I would highly encourage anyone that's listening today that's struggling with that passion that you may have had at once, but it's seemed to have fizzed out, especially after all that has been endured these last weeks. I really would encourage you to step back and to analyze and look at the big picture. I'd also encourage you to ask the Lord to rejuvenate that passion that you had or have for Christian education, for what you do. It's often easy to look at the negative part of the school year. Again, probably the beginning days of school seem so much far removed from what they normally are at this point in the year. But rethinking about that and focusing on the good is extremely important. It reminds me of an illustration a pastor once demonstrated when he was preaching a message on joy and having joy as a Christian. And he held up a piece of paper, and there was a small black dot in the center of the piece of paper. And he said, as people, we often focus on the negative things, and we forget the white part of that paper, the positive things. And I think that's true in the Christian life, but I also think it's true in the ministry. We often focus on that negative, but there's no doubt you've heard negative from parents and students about the plan that was enacted by the school. But there's always good to that. And so I would encourage you to, again, reevaluate, step back, understand that this year is not a typical year, and understand that the Lord really can rejuvenate that passion that you need in order to be an effective leader.
Thank you. I know the second thing that we want to encourage, is many of you are looking at re-enrollment and enrollment, is to know your brand. Now, Justin, you and Charlene 2 weeks ago in the marketing webinar talk about this, but can you just emphasize what exactly does brand mean in the Christian school realm?
Right. It really refers to identity, who you are and what you portray, like you were saying, your leadership style and what your school gets out there as far as message, what your website looks like. That's all of your identity. Even how your teachers interact with parents and students, that's your brand. And that's what parents have a perception of. So know what you stand for, because that's what's going to attract more people to you. You're a Christian school, private school, focused on delivering excellent education with a Christian focus. So therefore, people should know that right off the bat. That's who you are. So as you go to market, as you go to try to get people to come back to your school in the fall, or even attract new people, it's incredibly critical to make sure that everyone knows right off the bat your value proposition, what you stand for. That will attract the new people that are looking for that in the community.
And the key in this is also knowing not just who you are, but how you're unique, correct?
Absolutely.
Is that something that Christian schools need to emphasize, how they're different from all the other schools?
Especially in an area where there's multiple schools, a lot of these metropolitan areas, there might be 5 or 6 schools within 10 miles or 5 miles. So really, yes, and you're not going to be able to do everything. You're not going to be all things to all people. But you are able to, if you're a small school, you're able to emphasize that you're a family, a group of people that are able to provide a different level of service than maybe a larger school. And that might seem a negative at first, but you can turn that into a positive if you build it the right way and if it's part of who you are.
And I know I was talking with some on your team, just some good questions just to start getting schools thinking, what does make me different? You know, how are the GPAs, the standardized test scores, other metrics, how do they compare with the average? Technology solutions, specialized college prep courses. But again, not forgetting that not only are we academic institutions, but we're Christian institutions. And I know a significant differentiator in our schools is that we still teach character, we still teach morality, we still teach capital T truth, and adherence to scriptures. So those can be different things to say, how can I am unique, I am strong in those areas. How can I convey that to the public? But then a question I had, and Micah, you might be able to give your opinion on this. You know, we as the teachers or the principals might say, this is what is the strongest points of our school, but is that always the same that our families or that our students think? So I was wondering, what if, is there benefit in maybe sending out a survey to families and even to students and ask them, what do you most appreciate about this school?
Yeah, certainly. Surveying your constituency is extremely important because it gives you a sense of understanding of what they view as important, as what you were talking about, Cindy. I think sometimes as an administrator, your perception gets skewed because perception is not always the same thing as reality. And we hear that, we understand that, but how do we get information in order to be able to comprehend all that information? So I think surveying parents is very important. Asking them their opinions about the different traits of the school. What are some of our qualities that we have that you think are important? I think adding that qualifier is extremely important. What do you think is our greatest characteristic? You know, we all want to maintain a sense of balance in the academics and the spiritual and the athletics and any extracurricular things we offer. There certainly has to be a balance in all of that, but we want to be able to get the parents' perspective on that. So surveying them is very effective. What I often did was I would send out a mid-year survey and then an end-of-the-year survey, and they would ask different questions, and I would accumulate all that information and review it. Open-ended questions sometimes are beneficial because it gives them, the parent, the ability to speak freely about whatever the question may be. But sometimes that isn't as effective because it can turn into a vetting session at times. But you certainly can do a keyword search in those results and find out what's trending in terms of the parent's perspective. But multiple choice questions are very focused, and they often help quantify what you're thinking may be those core values that your school is trying to implement. A lot of times the administration will find there's just a disconnect in the communication. Parents may perceive something, but you as an administrator, based on the input from faculty and even success of students, may see something completely different. So a lot of times what I found the issue was at the schools I led, it was just a communication breakdown. You had great GPAs and great college entrances, exams and scores or results, and students were very successful. But a lot of times we assume that everybody knows those things, and they unfortunately do not. So focusing on some of those issues in a survey can really give important information that the administration can use.
And then they can just use that to say, this is specifically what I will communicate. Going back to your first point about how important it is to communicate your vision and hope.
Right, and also a failure of some administrators that do often give surveys is they don't share results. The constituency needs to understand what the community is saying about the school. You know, if safety is a major concern, then it's probably important for the administration to convey, hey, apparently based on the survey results, safety is a major concern. So this is my plan in order to be able to improve the safety of the school. Or if it's an academic issue, you have to respond to the surveys. It's not just gaining information. The parents need to know the results of those surveys.
And I would even say at the end of the survey, if you want to have it optional, that they leave an email address to follow up. Then, you know, if someone does say something that, man, I wish I could talk to that parent, then it is an anonymous survey, but they have the option to drop their email address in, and it makes you look like you're responsive and want to hear from them and maybe even follow up with them. I also think it's a great opportunity to collect testimonials. We'll get into word of mouth here in a little bit, but it's a great way to do that.
So lots of benefit then. And as you said, you do halfway through the year, but also at the end of the year. So this may be a good time to put together a survey. Justin, you have worked a lot with schools with enrollment campaigns, but also work with marketing campaigns in other areas too, but you've talked about the importance of not only setting goals, but then tracking them. So real quick, what are some major things that you would suggest principals and administrators track in their enrollment process?
I would imagine that they're all watching the numbers, right? You're all watching the applications that come in, the total enrollments. I think for some people, they need to make sure that they have a date that they say, this is the date that I count the students. So if it's September 10th, 3 weeks into the semester in the fall, then that's the date you mark and say, we've retained students. Then that needs to go ahead and be done. But what you also need to look at is by grade, because what that allows you to do is try to understand where you're dropping off and why. It might be that students aren't converting from 6th to 7th grade. Are they going to another school because they have more athletic opportunities? Or are they not converting from K-5 to 1st grade because of X, Y, Z? It allows you to have a high level view of where each student is falling off. And it could be by class even. By class could tell you which teacher isn't communicating with the parents the way they need to be. Everybody's struggled in the last 2 months to bring that level of communication and service up. But it'll allow you to see where the problems are and where you can jump in and help. It's not just to throw stones at the people that were working on the thing. It's to actually step in and provide support to help them grow. The teachers, the staff, even help the parents with the communication that's happening. So setting goals and tracking them in your marketing campaigns, in your enrollment numbers, it's absolutely pivotal. You should be looking at goals on the inquiry side, just like you look on the enrollment side. So how many people have come to your school and asked for information? That's pivotal to know how many each year, because it allows you to go, if I can convert 30% of them to be students, then you can start to predict growth every year.
Okay. Now, probably a number of our attendees do keep track, but if someone hasn't been keeping track up to this point, what are just some basic, what do you suggest of how they keep track? Where do they write it down or record?
Oh, I would say, if you're not keeping track like that, you'd use Excel or use Google Sheets or something that allows you to keep track digitally. I think it's great if there's collaboration involved, so maybe a Google Sheet document allows for your administrative assistant, as you were saying yesterday, or you and other team members that are involved in the admissions process to get insight into, okay, here's where this person is in the process. A lot of schools, I'm sure, have LMS systems that might even handle some application or just application systems that handle all the incoming inquiries as well. And some of those software packages would have it, but for an affordable way, the basics, it's Excel, it's Google Sheets.
And it doesn't have to be that complicated then, just keeping track of the numbers and specifically where the numbers are showing. Thank you. The next thing we talk about is devoting time and staff to enrollment efforts. Now, Mike, I know you've been administrator for several years. I've been a teacher for several years. So we probably look at this a little bit similar, but also a little bit different. I know often teachers are feeling very overwhelmed, and when they hear that, hey, you're going to be part of the marketing campaign, they might be losing some of that passion as well. What are some ideas of how to motivate staff, how to get them involved, besides just, hey, cinch your belts up, we're going to move forward another year?
Yeah, that's quite the predicament that the administration runs into, soliciting help from teachers that is not part of their normal routine. I think developing an admissions team is extremely important, and schools are going to do this differently depending on your size. If you're a small Christian school, the admissions team may just be you and as the administrator and maybe a school secretary, or if you have an assistant, maybe they could partake in that as well. Larger schools probably have an admissions counselor of some kind, which is extremely helpful. I would highly encourage you, if you can afford to place somebody in that position and pay them to do so, because it alleviates that pressure from you, and it gives somebody an opportunity to focus specifically on the admissions process. Schools are going to do it differently. The pattern that they follow in terms of interviewing the family, touring of the school, different things like that is going to be different for each school. But I think developing that plan and incorporating staff is very important. You could also use volunteers, parents that have put their children in your school for a long time. Maybe their children have graduated from the school. They make prime candidates for admissions, an admissions team. Grandparents, same thing. I would encourage you to reach out and try to solicit some of that help. Many schools are going to an automatic re-enrollment process, which they find very helpful. Basically, all that is you include in policy somewhere that students are automatically going to be enrolled for the upcoming school year. And there may be some quantifiers that you may want to put in there about families that unexpectedly have to move. If you live in a military town, you'll have a lot of that transition, I'm sure. So you may want to make exception for that, but oftentimes it alleviates the unknown when it comes to the re-enrollment process. Plus, with those fees, a lot of administrators use that money in order to purchase textbooks early so that they can receive discounts on those. So lots of ideas out there. Probably one of the most unique ideas you mentioned teachers involved. I have an administration friend who's cure for every kind of issue when it comes to needing additional help with something is to offer teachers $1,000 and to give them a free period. And they can use that free period to accomplish the work involved. It could be a yearbook. In this case, obviously the context we're talking about is admissions. I would encourage you to find that teacher that's passionate about your school, that's passionate about education, passionate about what they're doing, that has a very outgoing personality, can talk to most anyone. That would be a prime candidate for that person, that faculty member, to be part of that admissions team. And let them make the contacts, allow them to give the tour. And giving them that time to do so, I think will allow a teacher the ability to be able to comprehend it and be able to successfully achieve what you're trying to accomplish. So pay them $1,000, because when you think about it, $1,000, that's a drop in the bucket if they could get 5 students to come to your school in terms of tuition and money. So I think it's something to certainly consider.
Now, $1,000 and a free period, that does sound very attractive, especially the free period. Right. I think many teachers are saying that would be timeless. Right. But elementary, would that still work for elementary teachers? Instead of a free period, maybe say someone will take your science class or someone will take that. Have you seen that work just as well? Oh,
certainly, yeah. If it's an elementary teacher that's with the class primarily all day, allowing someone to go in and take that time in order to allow the elementary teacher to assume the position of that administration prospect, I think that certainly is doable.
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. And before I move in, I know another help will be what I mentioned earlier, that free marketing toolkit. I believe you're seeing some pictures of it there. And that will be available for you to take and to adapt and to fit your school. But that might help that teacher who's helping you market your school. And that also might help you if you are also leading that up. So if you haven't had a chance to look into that, abeka.com/front office will have a link where you can go and you can access that for your school. I know the next thing we're encouraging those working on enrollment and re-enrollment is to have a word of mouth strategy. 2 weeks ago, Justin, when you were here with Charlene said word of mouth, hands down, is the best way to promote your school.
You're going to see the most traction with all of your efforts when your parents that are satisfied are out there telling other parents locally. Obviously, social media plays a role in that. So getting those parents to share about their school makes not just word of mouth, it's word of mouth. Everybody's posting about your school. It could be a group effort to donate to a food bank, or it could be just, share some encouraging thoughts for your teacher today and your student's teacher. And you'd be amazed at how many parents just love the students' teachers, and they share it. And then when other people see it, the people that are looking at that school, whether this school would be a good fit, I don't know, there's no way to walk away from that without going, wow, this school really cares for their students. So the care and concern that you've shown during this pandemic, and the care and concern that you've always shown as a school will reap benefits in the word of mouth community, your community, and all of your parents as they go out and talk about how great your school is. Obviously, negatives spread faster than positives. So, you have to be quick to address it if it is a negative word of mouth thing spreading. But there's tremendous benefits to having some thought behind how do I get my community, my school, to talk great about me as a school.
So you would say like Facebook posts in which you ask them to encourage their favorite memory or their favorite experience.
And I would even say videos that you ask certain parents to come in. And I think we were talking about this yesterday. It doesn't have to be a whole production. The more raw and authentic, you just sitting down talking to a parent, asking them some questions about their school experience with you. We'll give you great content for your website as people passively look for schools. They see it on your website, they consume that information. It sounds like a real parent talking to them. Maybe, as you were saying, getting parents involved in that recruitment process. I mean, even if there's some sort of pay or something involved, I mean, I want to talk to a parent at a school. I want to know what their experience is. They're the most unbiased, and people look for those. That's why reviews are such a big thing now.
Okay. What are some ways that you encouraged word of mouth at your schools? Yeah,
word of mouth is very important. A couple things I tried, and it seemed to be very successful. I try to get into the different churches in the community. We're obviously like-minded in terms of what we believe, and trying to get in there and giving them information about your school is extremely important. Plus, it gives you that face-to-face contact with the church and with the pastor. We'd also honor pastors every other year and have a pastor's breakfast. And we would just bring them in, honor them, say thank you for what you do. Most schools have several different churches that send their kids to the school. So honoring them, and we would give them some information about the school, maybe a brochure, or put a child in front of them that may be performing a fine arts piece or something like that, just to let them know who we are. And because oftentimes we assume that everyone knows about our Christian school. You mentioned I had the opportunity to lead 2 different schools. One was in a very affluent area, but it was a new school, and a lot of people knew about it just because it had started up. It was in most cities that are affluent, they're busy, things are happening, and most people are interested in what's going on. And then the other school I had the opportunity to lead was in a very rural town, but they had been there since 1967. So it had a very long-standing history, but I was amazed how many parents would come in, new parents, and they would drive by the school. It was on a main highway in the city, and they would drive by the school and stop, and they would be so surprised, thinking, "Oh, I didn't even know there was a Christian school here," because they saw the church as they were going by. They didn't understand that there was a school there as well. So you can't make assumptions just because the school's been around a long time that everyone knows about it. So having that word of mouth can keep generating that positive momentum in order to generate those leads that you're looking for when it comes to parents that are interested in putting children in school. And I think that you could take this COVID-19 pandemic and really use that as a tool for increasing your enrollment. I mean, students have been home. I've heard many accounts from a lot of parents that students are in public schools that haven't just been satisfied with what's been done. Well, you can use that as an opportunity to give them information about your school. You definitely don't want to be disparaging about any Christian school or other Christian school in the area, or it goes back to that positive marketing. The branding, you want to focus on what you are, not necessarily what someone else is not. So I think you can use that as an opportunity to really enhance that, but just getting people involved and letting people know what's going on is very important.
And now, as we talk about having word of mouth, and as people hear about it, they're going to start making inquiries. And I know a huge thing is to be sure you capitalize on each inquiry by always following up. What are some strategies that you used in your schools to be sure that no one was just left abandoned?
Yeah, this probably, for many administrators, is one of the toughest things they have to deal with. Because we're so focused on the academics, the education, the teachers, the training, that we sometimes fail to follow up on those inquiries. That, by the way, is where your team can help you out tremendously. Something that I think is very important to have on your website, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, and I know it's discussed in marketing, you have a call to action button, an icon on your website that says, request information here, click here, or schedule a tour, click here. And what we do is you can set up your website in order, as soon as they click that button and type in the contact information, it generates an email that goes straight to the admissions team so they know who contacted you, what they're interested in, and that will give you a way to contact that family. So having that is very important. Also, we set up, and probably many administrators already have this as well, set up a generated email so that as soon as they produce that information and hit that send button, they immediately are sending an email saying, thank you for inquiring about our school. We've received this information. That way you have that instant contact. Justin, you were talking about the other day, whoever contacts the family the fastest when they're looking for schools is often the school that gets that family. So statistics really do point that out. So being quick to respond is very important, even if it's just an email that's sent. So I would contact them, or my assistant would contact them, or the school secretary would contact them. Usually within 2 days, 1 to 2 days, we would send them literature about the school, maybe a brochure. Obviously, it has to be digitized if you're going to send it through email, but that's a quick contact. Keep the school fresh on the parent's mind. And then within a week, we would make a phone call. So we would let them, and we didn't do it immediately. Some schools do, which is perfectly fine. We chose not to, just because it helps them think about everything and kind of process everything. So within a week, we'd call them, and then within 2 weeks, we'd give them another call or text them with some information about the school. I would encourage administrators to send a welcome video or a thank you video. Thank you for being interested in our school. That way they can put a face to the administration, and also you can use their name. So if it's the Edwards family, Mr. and Miss Edwards, thank you for visiting our website and for being interested in our school. My name is so-and-so. Yeah, it has that connection immediately with the administration and that family. So something that's simple, and again, as Justin was talking about, it doesn't have to be some elaborate lights and makeup and movie. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It could be just something very simple, very personal, because that's what people are looking for.
And even today, I mean, most people are doing Zoom calls from their living rooms with the dogs barking and the kids running in the background. So people are used to that level of authenticity, especially now.
So capitalize on that. So the big thing sounds like your school had a specific, within 1 to 2 days, we'll do this. Within a week, we'll do this. Within 2 weeks, we'll do this. And some of it was automated, so a little less off your shoulders. But the other, it was just scheduled, and you were able to keep track. And I think you've mentioned before, you did have an admissions team, so that did help share some of the weight. Now, one of the next things we talk about is we're looking at enrollment, but also re-enrollment. So we still have families in our school this year that we want to return next year. So what are some big things that you would just emphasize, Justin, that not to forget to recruit your current families? Yeah,
those parents are faced with a new decision every year, unless you have automatic re-enrollment, but still they have that thought process, is my student getting the best education? And multiple times throughout the year, they're probably, based on the circumstances and experiences, they're thinking that. You want to encourage them to continue with your school. So you have to market to them and communicate with them. It starts with the teacher. It goes all the way through the leadership of the school, giving hope, casting a vision. This is where our school is going to go. This is how we're going to grow. This is how your student's going to be prepared in X number of years when they're ready for high school, maybe adding an online dual enrollment program. All of those things kind of culminate to giving your current families the vision of where your school's going. And then, of course, it's just the communication. So if you're doing automatic re-enrollment, you're going to want to let them know, right? You're in the policy, like we said, but also maybe a follow-up the week before. I think you suggested yesterday there was like text messages a couple times before the actual deadline or when the charge would go on their account, so that people, if they were going to make a decision, they made it then. Instead of getting them to opt in, it's more of opting out. And it gives you a really quick way of understanding that information at that point in time. But if you don't have automatic re-enrollment, multiple touch points, sometimes teachers are used to call and ask. Obviously, teachers are swamped right now. Maybe it's the letters, the emails from the school reminding them to go ahead and enroll. And if they don't, after a certain period of time, survey them and find out why they didn't. Get that information, and then that'll help you next year. It might even help you right away. And then you maybe can call that family and maybe get the situation resolved, that they're the reason they weren't re-enrolling. But your current student body population, your current families that are in your school are what makes up most of your school turning over each year. So they're the critical ones that sometimes I think get left because everybody focuses on bringing in the new, but it's way, way cheaper to keep current customers than have to go out and recruit new ones.
And Micah, I know before, like you said, your schools were in automatic re-enrollment, so that helped because some parents just don't re-enroll because they weren't thinking about it. But also before maybe an official enrollment letter went out, about a week before, you would send out kind of a less formal email just to keep the communication. What are some things that you might include in that, especially this year with COVID?
Oh yeah, I think again, communication is vital when it comes to this re-enrollment process. So talking about what your plans are for COVID when the students come back in the fall. What are you thinking about doing? Do you have multiple plans in place in order to be able to think about that? So I think it's important to be able to convey that information in a letter of some kind or an email. Just keeping parents informed of what's going on is very important.
Okay. Now we have just a few more points left with Micah and Justin, but as you have questions, put them in that Q&A section and we'll get to them in just a few minutes. I know we wanted to emphasize that the school website is just like word of mouth is the best way to market your school. The school website is the best way to show people. Micah, what are some things that you would emphasize on that school website? You already emphasized a call to action.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would even include my COVID-19 response on my website. That way parents that aren't familiar with their school understand that, one, our website it's a live thing. It's not just a stagnant page that never gets updated. So including information like that also portrays that you have a plan and you kind of have an idea of what's going to be going on. Of course, your tuition prices, FAQ page, all types of things that can be important. The key to a website nowadays, though, is to make sure it's responsive. If you don't know what that means, basically your web page is able to be viewed on multiple devices. So on your computer, on a tablet, on a cell phone. There's a study done from 2015 to 2019 and that was trying to track how people are viewing the internet. And they concluded that 50% of all internet traffic now is done on a cell phone. So if you don't have that implemented into your webpage, that it just presents a foul taste when it comes to presentation. You want your best foot forward because your webpage is often their first interaction with your school.
And those things, responsiveness and some of the updated things, is what Google, which is a search engine where your parents are typing in Christian schools near me or Christian schools in Arizona or wherever that you are. Those are the things that are affecting how well your rankings are on Google. And we can talk about this in a minute too, but where you show up on Google is probably very similar to, which schools are the most prominent in your area. And if you're not showing up on the first page in Christian schools in Tucson, then you're going to have to look at how your website is. What is it responsive? Is it showing the right keywords? Does it actually call you a Christian school in your copy of your website? All of those things are going to have an impact.
And I know we've mentioned testimonials and videos, but they would also work really well on
Absolutely.
The website.
And I mean, we talked about this last time, that the fact that you can't do a real tour, so maybe a virtual tour, maybe a video just walking through your school. This is the facilities. Everybody understands it's empty. But when it comes back full, you invite people to come, when your school's open again, invite people to come back and visit.
Yeah, the administration needs to decide the purpose of their website. For my schools, it was a main source of communication for people that were interested in our school. We had an LMS that took care of the school side, the academic side, the interaction with parents and posts and things like that. And then we used our social media for kind of a day-to-day type setting of our school to keep people aware of what was going on. So you need to decide what the purpose is. It may be the main hub that you keep all your documents on, that people can, current parents can find that field trip request form or whatever it may be. Or it may be like, for me, it was that main tool for telling the community and telling really the world what our school is all about.
And who you are. And then I know, just as we wrap up, the big thing is continuing to generate leads through online marketing strategies. And Justin, you and Charlene spent most of the marketing webinar from 2 weeks ago discussing this. But what are just some quick things that you would highlight that still play a significant role in enrollments and re-enrollments?
In that webinar, we showed a funnel. And so at the top of the funnel is your efforts to get people to come to your website or visit your school. And then each stage of that funnel, less people are going to be in it. They're going to drop off. So whether that's people that request information and they go and fill out an application and then do they actually enroll, all of these stages, there needs to be steps, active steps on the administration, on the admissions team actively pushing them to take that next step to enrollment. That's what's going to help you grow, and a lot of schools don't tighten that up as much as they should in terms of efficiency. But as we push people to our website using things like Google search ads we referenced last time, and Facebook ads, Instagram ads, I think you even said yesterday, if kindergarten and first grade are the ones lacking, then target females between the ages of 20 and 30 in your area with that messaging. Facebook even allows you to see if they have kids, and you don't actually see the person, but you see the group of people that have children, and then you can target them with messaging about your kindergarten programs or your first grade programs. And that allows you to be more direct and spend more money on what matters, and not just blasting it out to a bunch of people that aren't relevant.
Any last comments on generating leads, Micah, before we go to some of the questions?
I think what Justin mentioned is very important, that targeted and focused marketing component with re-enrollment. I do know some schools that include a pop-up on their website where as soon as the parent or whoever views that website, it'll have how full a class is. And kind of, you want to create a sense of urgency with the re-enrollment process. So having things like that, saying, hey, we're almost at our capacity in fourth grade. If you're going to enroll, now's the time to do it. You know, those types of things can be helpful. And also creating waiting lists and things like that can generate that sense of urgency that you need to get this done, because schools are different. You may have be in a highly competitive area where your school is sought out after for many things, you've done a great job, and you don't have any problem filling up classes. And then you may be a smaller school that's trying to figure out how you're going to fill this class. Well, that marketing component and letting people be aware of what's the current enrollment, where are we at, can help, again, generate that need for push them to the action of re-enrolling.
And it sounds like both of you mentioned, just because you have been able to track and you're keeping records not only of your enrollment, but also your marketing practices, you're able to know where do I need to focus it on.
Right.
So just keeping that Excel spreadsheet. Well, we've got some questions here. One is from Julia. She says, what if the definition of who you are, so know your brand, as a school is very dependent on the school community spending time together in communal prayer, worship and celebration, character development, the closeness of the family unit, but you live in an area where both public and private schools will not be fully open in the fall. So some of their main identities are needing to adapt because of COVID. In our area, many of the activities and strong points that made us unique will be nearly impossible with local health ordinances.
That's a tough one. I don't know if Micah has any specific ideas.
Well, my thought would be to demonstrate that you have already established those things. Being a well influential school in your community, you probably have pictures or videos of things that have been done in the past. So making parents aware that COVID-19, it's going to impact some of these things that we were able to do, but it doesn't detract from who we are. And also encourage them to understand that the COVID-19 pandemic, it's not an eternal thing. It's going to be completed. And once it's completed, things will get back to some sense of normality. So you'll be able to get involved in those community outreaches and those community activities. So I think displaying and portraying that it had existed and it still will continue to exist will help create the idea in parents' mind that, oh, this is still the same school. It's not going to change these things just because of these last couple of months.
And you'd be surprised at how many times, even now, I know with Pensacola Christian Academy, they did virtual K-5 graduations by class via Zoom. And it wasn't the best thing, of course. Nobody wanted to have to do that. Everybody wants to be in person. K-5 graduations are always such a great, happy time at PCA. But obviously that wasn't able to happen. So your teachers can come up with great ideas that can connect and keep everyone communicating together in that short period of time. But I agree with you. Put that information on your website, have videos showing what your school normally does, you know, how your school reaches out to the community, and then allow people that are visiting and trying to understand what your school brings, see that. And that could be in your social channels, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else you use, but also on your website.
Well, and we've seen even in the last couple of weeks from schools, we've had parents send in, they recorded a teacher's interaction with their child over Zoom. They were so impressed with that teacher. We've had parent testimonials saying this teacher has just gone the extra mile. Those would be ways of saying these were our strengths, and this is how we continued them and adapted them with COVID. And I guess capitalize on that too, not just what we plan to return to normal, but until normal, how we're still able to keep those and just keeping them going up. I like this question from Michael. What is SEM and SEO?
Okay, search engine marketing, I should have specified that, is SEM. So you think when you go on Google and you type in Christian schools in Tucson, Arizona, oftentimes organically, whatever school is local will show up. But what you can do as a brand is go in and buy through Google, Google Ads, you can buy access to the top of the page and run an ad. And that allows you to put yourself at the very top of the page. And so how you go in and advertise like that, we actually have just described on that previous webinar. And you can go back there. We put resources on our website, abeka.com/front office, and how to get started with Google Ads. That's SEM, that's search engine marketing. So that gets you in front of customers that are looking, which are, the prime candidates, right? You're not having to go out and convince somebody, they're already looking for you. And then SEO is just how your website shows up on all of those platforms organically. So search engine optimization. So you can go in, and if you're a Christian school in Arizona, right, and you're a Tucson Christian Academy, picking on Arizona today, but and you don't have the words Tucson on your website, or you don't have it often on your website, when somebody searches those terms, it's not going to show up as organically as your competitors that are using those terms. So it comes down to optimizing your website for the keywords that people are searching for. If they're searching for Christian schools, or if they're searching for Christian private schools, you can get a sense of that by doing some research on Google's different tools to understand what people are looking for for the services that you provide.
Okay. And as you said, if you were to go to abeka.com/front office, you'll see that previous webinar recording, but also underneath it, just a link. You would put together a number of ways where they could learn how to do these on Google. Leslie asks, is it possible to get a sample copy of the parent surveys you spoke about earlier? I don't know, Micah, in your school, if that is something your school still uses and privatizes. I know my first thought too is potentially that may be a good question to reach out on the Facebook group for Christian school administrators. Hey, what are some good survey questions you've used in the past?
Yeah, I could certainly, I probably could provide that information for you. We have our schools@abeka.com email address, and they could forward that to me, and I could help you with some of those things. Really, what you stated, though, is a good source. Getting involved in that Facebook community with other administrators and principals can help. A lot of it will be dependent on what you're looking for in the surveys. So there certainly are some things that I would be more than happy to share with you, but you could certainly get some from other administrators through that Facebook. Also, you could just simply Google survey questions, end of the year survey questions, and it'll populate several different websites or sources that could help you determine some of those questions.
Okay, so schools@abeka.com will be just a good way to re-ask that question, and they'll forward that information to Micah, and he'll try to help you. I know Chris is asking about a recording. We do record these webinars. You'll be able to access them a little bit later at abeka.com/front office. So this will be recorded, and your team will be able to watch it later. Here is from Bonnie. She says, we are greatly hindered by CDC guidelines. What is your understanding of these, and how can we really plan to have a school with kids if they can't be kids because of the hindrances of those guidelines? So parents are already starting to stress. So there's conflict right now between how do you have school and still keep up with these?
I know Abeka is looking to do as much as we can for the fall to provide resources and offerings to help schools, but there is that limitation of interaction between students, and I'm sure Micah has some ideas too, but just looking at it, you have to follow your local health board. You have to follow your CDC guidelines for your area. It's very frustrating sometimes when it's not clear, but I think as you go about that and as you give them feedback, this is how we plan to mitigate, problems. Hopefully your local health board and hopefully the federal level, the CDC, it starts to ease some of the guidelines. And hopefully over the summer, this starts to become less of a thing that we all have to cope with and adjust everything in our lives for. That's, no promise, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you certainly do have to follow the guidelines. we talked about branding. It would really be devastating to your branding if you had school and said, I don't want to follow these guidelines set by the CDC. So, but I would encourage that parent that is skeptical and concerned. There are other countries that have already gone back to school. I was reading a few weeks ago that schools in Sweden and Finland, the COVID-19 didn't impact them as much, but it did impact them. But they've already returned to school. And they actually, the article had some different pictures of the students that were still using social distancing, but still in the classroom. So it's certainly something that we hope will subside. It really would in a lot of areas, but there probably will be some areas that still have to make some adjustment because of this. So I would encourage the parent to understand that other schools have already implemented some of these guidelines and still been able to go back to school, and try to be positive in your outlook, but also help them understand that you have multiple plans in place in order to deal with the various restrictions that may still be in place.
And so that goes to communicating with the constituency. And even if there's nothing specific to communicate yet, to assure them we are making plans. And even, I know we've spoken about in previous webinars, talking to them. Maybe there would be a school community meeting in which let's get some feedback from parents. These are some of our ideas. What is your thought? Might help encourage that. From Mr. Jackson, please explain a conversion funnel.
So in our marketing webinar, and I'm not sure if we have the ability to pull it up now, different PowerPoints, but as we look at your enrollment funnel for your school. So what that would be at the first step, you have a customer that maybe is searching on Google. They search for Tucson Christian Academy. They go to your website. Your website has a request information button. They fill that out, and that sends an email to you as a school administrator or me as someone who works in that admissions or marketing, and we can plan follow-up. Well, that would be your highest level of your funnel. You probably get, depending on your school size, 100 to 1,000, a year. And so if you get 1,000 of them a year, how many of those are actually converting to students? Well, probably not 1,000. There's a lot of schools out there, and there's a lot of parents searching for each school and trying to get the best fit. So you want to communicate what your school stands for at that point. But each stage of that funnel would be described as saying, okay, they started an application, maybe they came for a tour, maybe that's another step. They started an application, they went and completed that application, they filled out any extra paperwork, and then they actually enrolled. So you can kind of see it becomes a funnel because it's not usually the same all the way down. It's not a cylinder. It might be 1,000 at the top. It might be 600 started an application. It might be 400 completed an application. You might end up with 325 students at their school. So as you look at that, that would really be defined as the conversion funnel. In each of those stages, there's drop off. There's people that started an application but didn't finish it. Well, why didn't they finish it? And what's keeping? Is it financial aid? Is it the area and COVID, who knows? Or is it just the fact that they didn't get follow-up and they didn't really know what was the next step? Okay.
And again, because you and Charlene spoke about that in the previous webinar, you don't even have to go to the webinar recording. If you go to abeka.com/front office, we did make that a PowerPoint available. So you could just download the PowerPoint, and about halfway through near the end, you'll see a picture of that funnel. And the big thing is just to start asking yourself, why am I losing them here? What can I do to retain a little bit more to this step and a little bit more to the next step? So I do appreciate those of you who've taken the time to join us today, and I trust that you will just have many of you are wrapping up school this coming week, that you'll be able to see that go well. And we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thank you, Micah. Thank you, Justin.